Hello. We're going to start the film today like this. We were out and about yesterday recording, and everything worked beautifully as we expected until, of course, I got home and started editing the film. And we realized there were some rather bizarre problems with the audio, and we weren't very sure what it was at first, but it turns out there was a little problem with my what do you call it, stick-on mic, and we're not quite sure what it was. So when you watch the film in a minute, there's going to be a couple of scenes where there's some rather strange sound. And actually I had to leave out 2 or 3 scenes altogether when we were sort of introducing the organ, when I coupled everything together and played a bit of tutti and things. I had to leave that out altogether because the sound was dreadful. Now, the sound from the organ, that we, with professional microphones down in the church, that's perfect. And that sounds absolutely amazing in this video. So at least we've got that. But like I say, I had to cut out a couple of scenes because something really wasn't working. So I'm very sorry about that. But nonetheless, I would suggest that you watch the video all the way to the end, because there's a couple of rather interesting features that we found in the church when we were there yesterday. So it's not just the organ in the church. There's a couple of other little secret features in there as well. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.
Hello, we're back, out and about, and today we've got something rather special. We're in a very historic church, which features a very historic organ, and they together are in a rather historic city here in Germany. We're in a place near Frankfurt, near Wiesbaden, where we've been before. It's called Flörsheim am Main. Flörsheim on the river Main. That is a painting of St. Martin. And for those of you who know your German history, St. Martin is the patron saint of the Diocese of Mainz. And as we swing down, you get to see the organ prospect there. We'll come back to that in a minute. This church used to belong to the Diocese of Mainz. It now belongs to the Diocese of Limburg. And that's a rather important connection, because this is the church, and this is the organ where my boss basically plays. In my church in Herschbach also belongs to the Diocese of Limburg, and each diocese has its own church music director, Kirchenmusikdirektor, as it's called in German, and Andreas Grossmann is his name, and he's been here basically since he was a little boy. His dad was organist here, and he got to know this organ as a young chap and got to love organ music and so on, and that's what got him into studying church music. And then he, of course, took over the position here, and he's been organist here ever since. And Andreas has very kindly given us some time here at the organ today. Now, something rather special about the organ is older than the church it's in. Does that make any sense? The organ is from 1709, and the church is from 1766. The organ was in another church first. When the church was finished here, they didn't have an organ planned for it, but there was a church over in Frankfurt which for some reason had an organ ready to sell or whatever, and that organ then made its way over here. So that's also why the prospect of the organ sort of covers St. Martin a little bit up there. So there's a little bit of interesting history for you. 1666. The Brits watching will remember that date, 1666. The Great Fire of London, the Great Plague, all of those things, remember? Well, it wasn't just in London. That was happening pretty much all around Europe, yeah? The plague. And in this tiny little village, Flörsheim, now, a lot of people, but certainly our English-speaking guests and viewers, they're not going to recognize the name Flörsheim. You'll know things like Mainz, you'll know Wiesbaden, you'll know Frankfurt, yeah? But this little village, basically, it's right next to those places, and it celebrates one of, well, actually, it's, I think, the only place I've heard of that celebrates this. So, 353 years ago, that was the Great Plague, yeah? And since then, this town has sort of celebrated the end of that era, as it were. And Andreas told me it's like sort of taking Christmas and Easter, putting them together and making a huge procession out of it. And there's a big church service on this day, and then there's a procession through the town, and residents decorate their houses and decorate the streets with flowers and everything. It's a big party, basically, a big big church day, and this is still celebrated, and it makes Flörsheim a very, very famous place. Something we very rarely do. That's lovely. Okay, we're very lucky. It's only 1:45. If it was on the hour, then I'd be deaf at the moment. Actually, I wouldn't. This isn't used for that, but this is something. Yeah, a little Easter egg. We don't really do Easter eggs in churches very often. That's what you call these things these days, the hidden secrets. And this is something the residents of Flörsheim hear regularly, but I bet they've never seen it before. And this is the newest and also one of the deepest or lowest sounding bells in the region. It was, I told you about the sort of great celebration day they have here in Flörsheim, and this bell was a gift to the church back in 2016, so it's only 3 years old. And like I say, it's a rather special bell because it's a very deep sounding bell. It's one of the lowest pitched bells in the area, and probably in the world as well. It sounds a low G. Now, I can't let you hear it, unfortunately, because when it starts sounding, people of Flörsheim run from their houses and jump into the river or something like that. It's only used in very special occasions. So I can't let you hear it, but it's a rather special thing, a rather cool thing to see. I get some rather interesting comments from people around the world when we're visiting churches, and some people, not so many now, but when we started doing this, a lot of people, I got a comment, for example, saying, "How dare you play the organ wearing jeans? You'll be thrown out of the church." I said, well, okay, fair enough. Our local priest wears jeans under his robes, whatever. And a lot of people sort of, they disassociate the church from anything humorous. Yeah, and I think that's a bit of a shame, because historically speaking, the church was definitely a place where you could still have a bit of fun and a bit of a laugh as well. And there's something we discovered here in the church, or in the organ actually, in Flörsheim, that I bet you've never ever seen before. Now, in the sort of organ prospect, there are always little angels. Yeah, you've seen them around the world in different organs. There's always going to be little angels. Well, here in Flörsheim, the organist gets to see the angels from the back, which includes a rather cute view of the naked little bottoms. Finally, we get to sit at the organ. So enough storytelling for today. So this is also, historically speaking, a very, very important organ. And I think I actually got something wrong when I introduced it at the beginning. I said 1709. The organ is from 1709. That's true. It was enlarged in 1748. And I think it actually only arrived in this church later. 1809 is when it arrived in this church. So the church is from 1766, and then 50 years later the organ arrived. I think that was exactly what happened. I think I got that wrong at the beginning, so I've just corrected that again. Now, the organ is very important because it features some of the only remaining stops by a Baroque German organ builder called Johannes Jakob Dahm from Mainz. And in this organ there are still 11 stops from Dahm. And the organ was, of course, enlarged and changed. And then in 1959 and 1960, it was completely restored and again enlarged by a local, well, not a local, a German organ builder, local to Germany, of course. Ott is his name, O-T-T, Paul Ott from Göttingen. He enlarged and restored the organ here, but there are still these 11 original stops from the Dahm organ in there. Now, 3 manuals plus pedals and 39 speaking stops. There are 41 stops to pull, but 2 of those are tremulants for 2 of the manuals there. So, like I say, 3 manuals plus pedals. Now, you'll see there are no little sort of electronic helpers to help us along. It's all completely mechanical. Completely mechanical. The only electric thing in the organ, well, apart from the light, of course, is the electric motor that's providing all the wind. So it is a true Baroque style instrument. Now, it's a neo-Baroque instrument because Ott did that in the late 50s and early 60s, but it contains original Baroque pipework, like I told you before, from the builder Johann Jakob Dahm. Okay, so this organ is also a perfect example of something called the Werkprinzip. Now, organ nerds out there know exactly what I'm talking about, but for those of you who don't, I shall simplify it for you. What it basically means is, and we've seen this in other organs already, but not quite as clearly as in this organ here. We have a sort of organ prospect here that you've had a look at before, and in the middle, or right above my head, we have all the pipework for the Hauptwerk, okay, beautifully arranged so that there's a sort of a stereo effect. And we'll talk about that in a minute with another division. And then to the sides, of that, the big pipes you can see on the sides, there you are. Those are the pedal pipes on either side. So again, stereo, laid out in stereo. And then here, right in front of the organist's nose, basically, you have the Brustwerk, which means chest, so the Brustwerk. And then again, behind the organist, you have the Rückpositiv. Rück means behind in German, don't forget, so the Rückpositiv. And I can actually open up the Rückpositiv and show you the pipes. So Andreas was kind enough to give us the key that opens up the Rückpositiv. And in here, we see some beautifully laid out pipes. And they're laid out in a slightly different way to what you might normally expect. Now, we've been inside organs before. Normally, you would expect the pipes to be sort of split between a C side and a C sharp side. We've been through that before, but here it's done slightly differently. You can see sort of different groups of, if we take this rank of pipes here, and they have a sort of, they've got this lovely sort of cone shape to them, rather good looking pipes, I think. And they've got, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and behind it another 5, and then here 5 much smaller pipes with 5 smaller pipes behind that. And then here in the middle, 7 much larger pipes. These are the biggest ones. So that's going to be C, and that's going to be C sharp, and that's going to be D, and so on and so on and so on. So they're sort of not chromatic, and they're not split up C side. They're separated in thirds. And what that does, it sort of diffuses the sound around the room much better. It's a very clever way of doing things, and that's original. That wasn't done by Ott when he restored the organ. That was done by the original organ builder. That's the way they laid the pipes out even back then. So Baroque organ builders really knew what they were doing when they came to sort of stereophonic sound. All these people who are talking about stereophonic sound nowadays and surround sound, well, organ builders were doing it in the 1600s. We're going to have a quick look at some of the stops in the organ. I've already said there are 39 speaking stops, and it would take forever to look through all of them because they're all rather interesting in their own way. And like I say, 11 of them are from the original organ, or original Baroque organ. Now, I can't remember which 11, but I remember some of them, so that's the important thing. I'm going to start with the Rückpositiv, and it starts with an 8-foot flute, a Großgedacht. Look how all these things are beautifully handwritten here on the organ. So we have a Großgedacht 8-foot, and that is a large-scale stopped flute here in the Rückpositiv. When I just did the German variation of this, I was sort of doodling around in G major, and for the English version, I'm going to doodle around in E flat. So for those of you who know what I'm talking about, that's what I'm doing. There is a lovely 4-foot flute, and I know that this comes from the original organ, and it's got a rather lovely chiffy sound to it. Now I hope this is coming through in the recording, because up here at the organ I can hear that sort of separation of the pipes. Remember I said they're split in thirds on either side. It gives them a nice separation, and I hope we're getting that on the recording. Here are the 2 flutes together we've had so far, the 8 and 4-foot flute. On its own, there's a rather beautiful 2-foot flute called a flageolet, and that definitely comes from the original Baroque organ. It's a huge sounding flute. It's absolutely amazing. It fills the church on its own. It's a wonderful sound. 8 and 2 together. I think that's marvelous. We have a 4-foot principal that I know also comes from the original organ. It's the pipes you can see in the prospect. with that, I can of course build up a principal chorus. So here's 8, 4, and 2. It's based, of course, on that Großgedacht, but still a lovely big sound, even though it's only the root positive. And here's one of the one-foot stops in the organ, so we're brightening the sound all the time. And of course, our rook positive would not be complete without a mixture. It's called a scharf. It's a 3-rank mixture, and it's very bright. The more I play this organ, the more I realize this would have been the perfect organ to demonstrate our toccata and fugue in D minor on. I think I will have to come back one day and present something proper on this organ, so a nice piece of heavy Bach music. I'll ask Andreas if I'm allowed to do that. Okay. Moving upstairs to our Brustwerk, we have some rather lovely 8 and 4-foot flutes. I've got to be very careful how I play here, because the keys are much shorter, and they don't have as much playing depth as the other ones here, so the mechanics between the keys and the pipes is much shorter as well, of course, and very direct. So I've got to be very, very careful how I play. You see that? I just brushed that key in the way, you hardly have to touch it and it's already playing. Got to be very, very careful here. We have a 2-foot principal, which brightens the whole thing up rather a lot. For a little bit of flavor, there is a Sifflöte, 1 1/3. So again, it's getting higher and higher all the time. And one of the highest mixtures I've ever heard in my life, a cymbal in German, a 3-rank mixture again. And I thought the scharf mixture here in the rook positive was high. Wait till you hear this. This is not for people who are suffering from tinnitus. Did you see how low I was playing there? I was playing at the bottom end, and it's incredibly high. If I play higher, oh boy. It's a very bright sound. There is also a vox humana here in the Brustwerk, which would normally be played with its tremulant, but like I said, I'm leaving the reeds out because of, let's just say because of temperature problems here in the church. And here we are finally in our Hauptwerk. We have, of course, a beautiful principal 8-foot. Those are the pipes you see in the prospect. A bit fancy harmony as well there. We of course have our octaves 4 and 2, so we have a sort of principal chorus 8, 4, and 2 here. Something that you see very rarely in a Hauptwerk is a 1-foot principal, and that gives it a very bright, cheery sound. Of course, we have a lovely mixture there. It's not one of those incredibly bright mixtures like we had over here. It's a 4-2-5 rank. Starts as a 4-rank mixture and then works its way into a 5-rank mixture as we get higher. And it's got a nice balanced sound. We have a 16-foot bourdon, which adds a bit of depth to the whole thing. But again, nothing overpowering so far. Very, very nice. 8 and 4-foot flutes. Which are rather lovely. And then a sort of selection of mixture stops, but sort of separated out. So it's like a little cornet that you've taken apart. So here's a 2 2/3, a 1 3/5. That gives us our clarinety effect. If I add the 1 foot to that, it makes it even cheerier. And then there's this very, very bright quint cymbal, a 3-rank mixture on top, which is very sort of chirpy. It's almost like a sort of little glockenspiel in the organ. It's really rather cute. There is, of course, a trumpet. And if I sort of get my principal chorus going and add the trumpet to that, it's a little bit out of tune, but it's a lovely trumpet. So I'm going to include it. It's the newest stop on the organ. It's only sort of 20 years old or so, and it's rather lovely. Here's a bit of Bach. That's a rather delicious principal chorus. And we'll finish off with a quick look down at the pedals. Now we have 2 sort of 16 and 8 divisions. We have a 16 and 8 flute, so bourdon and a flute sound. Rather lovely. The same thing as a principal sound. Now I know the principal 16 is one of the newer stops here in the organ. It only used to have the sub-bass 16, which wasn't really big enough, so they added this to give it a bit more depth. And it does have a fair bit of depth. The pipes are right at the back of the organ, but they speak out into the church rather beautifully. And that it does give it a bit of depth, so it's not overwhelming. So here's all the 16 and 8s together. Not bad. We have a 4-foot, of course, and a rather large mixture, a 4 to 6 rank mixture. And then I will briefly show you the 3 pedal reeds, 16, 8 and 4. They are rather out of tune here, but I want to show you that they're not these sort of enormous pedal reeds that you'd find on a French style organ or even an English style organ, but very round and nice sounding. Like I say, a little bit out of tune. Here's the 16 on its own. It's a good sound, isn't it? It's not overwhelming. So, there we have it, a quick introduction to all the stops, or most of the stops, on this rather lovely historic instrument. So before we get round to playing a piece of music for today, I of course want to once again say thank you. This time I am of course thanking you for helping get our crowdfunding project complete, and my was it successful. We went way over budget, which is wonderful because that means I can sort of extend the recording to a lot, well, to make it a lot better than I thought it was going to be, so that's rather wonderful. So thank you for helping out there. What's happening now with the recording? Well, you know, it's going to be a recording of organ improvisations and jazzy stuff and so on and so on. I'm not going to tell you where it is yet. I'm going to keep you guessing about that, but we've got everything sorted. And by the time it's going to take the Start Next, that was the crowdfunding project site, yeah, by the time they get the money collected and paid out to me, that could take another couple of weeks. But we are allowed to, I've talked to the recording people, and we can get the recording done. So that keeps us in the right time frame. Yeah? If we had to wait till the end of October to get the recording done, we wouldn't be done on time. So I hope that we'll have the recording done in the next couple of weeks, which means once the cash is there, it can be sent straight off to the production company to get the CDs pressed and printed and all that sort of thing. And that means, hopefully, as intended, by the middle of November, everything should be ready to be posted out to you, the lucky people who were able to order your CD in advance through our crowdfunding campaign. So thank you very much for that. Thank you also for the continued support on the regular channels. We have Patreon and Steady for little memberships, and we have the PayPal me link as well if you just want to donate something to the channel. You may have noticed last week's video was filmed differently, and I mentioned something about it, but I didn't say what it was. We received a gift recently. Someone decided we need a GoPro camera and basically donated us a GoPro camera, which is absolutely wonderful. And we're sort of testing it out in videos. I used it for the Toccata and Fugue video where I had the camera positioned here looking down on the manuals, and we used it last week for everything. So we're, I'm testing it out to see what it can do, because it's all very new and exciting. And we could have a camera fixed up in the organ pipes or somewhere, somewhere exciting, so that it all looks very different. So we're going to play around with that, and that's rather wonderful. And that got me to thinking, because someone a couple of weeks earlier also said, you need a decent microphone stand. Here is a certain amount of cash for you. Go and buy yourselves a decent microphone stand, which we then did. So, if you have a sort of an idea of something you think we really need for our channel, then feel free to let us know and feel free to help us out. It's all very greatly received. Someone said, you've got your new microphones there, but what about a real professional microphone? Well, there is something out there on the market. It's called the AEA R88 Mark II, and it's a stereo ribbon mic, specially designed for exactly what we're doing, recording organs in churches and things. It's absolutely amazing. The only problem is it costs about €3,000. So it's not exactly on the Christmas list, but that's something we might look towards one day when the channel really takes off. And we can do this as a sort of full-time job, which is, of course, our target. Right, enough of that. Thank you very much for helping out, as always. I'm going to close up today with an improvised piece of music to continue with our theme towards the CD and improvisations. When I read the website about this organ, Andreas said, because of the acoustic of the church, because of the way the pipes are set up, remember the way I showed you in the root positive there, it's very easy or very clean to hear exactly what's going on when you're playing. So sort of polyphony, for example, yeah? You can hear every line individually the way it should be played. Well, I can't really improvise polyphony. I can't think that way. I'm a harmonic person. I need melodies and chords. So polyphony is not my thing, but I did find a very nice little simple piece of music by one of my favorite organ composers. That's our old friend Siegfried Karg Ehlert, who lived from 1877 to 1933. A rather eccentric chap, also a cinema organist by trade, but he composed some absolutely delicious organ music, and it gets played far too seldom, which I think is a shame. And some of his compositions are his improvisations that he then wrote down, and here's one I'm going to play today. It's his improvisation on Freu dich sehr, o meine Seele, a very old church hymn, and it's a very simple, slow, calm improvisation, and it works rather beautifully on this organ. So, hope you enjoyed our little video from Flörsheim am Main today. A big thank you, of course, to Andreas for giving us the time here on the organ, and yeah, look forward to seeing you next time. See you then. Bye bye. So while we're up looking at bells and things, Andreas said, why don't we have a quick look at something else that's here? So we're in the roof of the church. If you sort of, all the rafters, and thankfully they've put some flooring here so we can wander around. Now, you've probably heard of organs full of dead pigeons and all sorts of other things. Well, yeah, obviously because churches are big, airy buildings, there are going to be openings and birds sometimes get in. But I've never seen anything like this before. A local ornithology group has installed a kind of sort of internal church nest for owls. I'm not joking, it's for owls. It's written here, it's for Schleiereulen. I have no idea what Schleiereulen are in English. It might be barn owls or tawny owls. I'll have a look, and by the time this goes online, I'll sort of paste it in what they're actually called in here. But yeah, and obviously we've got to be a little bit quiet here because it's daytime, which means they're all in there, sound asleep. And then at night time, they wake up, fly out from the church, and go and find their victims of the night, as it were. So yeah, this church is full of great little surprises. I've never seen anything like this before. Maybe it's more out there, but it's not very often you get to wander around the roof of a church.